That's not my outro. Who am I? Hello everybody, my name is Kelsey and we're about to get very, very nerdy with some of my not so favorite books this year. So I was looking over the books that I've read over this entire year, and about 7 stuck out to me as being kind of my disappointing reads. So I thought that I would go over those with you today. Don't worry though, the next video you see after this one will be my surprising reads, so it does get better. And I do only have about 7 on this list, which is a pretty good overall, I think, considering I've read, my goal was 50 and I know I've surpassed that, so at least 60, maybe 70 books, I'm not 100% sure. So 7 out of those I think is a win. And as I look at this list, most of these took place before June, so the second half of my reading year was definitely a lot better. But let me just kind of tell you a little bit about books that I consider my disappointing reads and why I think so. The first book that I read was an audiobook that I found on Scribd, and that was Stephen Colbert's Midnight Confessions. Now, this book I ended up giving, I gave it 4 stars? That feels wrong. So I gave this book to my dad a couple years ago for Christmas, and I think it's really funny. I loved it. Like, Stephen Colbert is one of my favorite people to watch, and I loved his Midnight Confessions that he has on air. So I thought that this book would be really fun, and if I found an audiobook, which I did, I thought it'd be so cool because he narrated it. But it turned out to just be like the sections of the shows, like, edited together. Like, you even could hear the audience in the background, like, clapping along and laughing. So it wasn't as funny as I wanted it to be. I think this is better if you see the actual videos of them than if you just listen to them, because some of them are funny and that's great and all, but as far as, I think I'm judging the audiobook over the actual book, I think it would be funnier if you read them than it would be if you just listened to them. So that's why this one was kind of disappointing to me, because I really wanted it to be this great funny thing, and I thought I was going to have this great, like, hour-long laughing fest, and it just really wasn't that. The next book is my first book that I feel like I talked about a lot on this channel, and I just, like, it keeps coming back up and as one that I just didn't like, and that was Mun Mun by Jessie Andrews. This one I ended up giving 3.5 stars to, and I think for me the reason I didn't like it was because I loved the world. I loved the idea of the world, and I've said this multiple times before, is this book is set in a place where depending on how much money you have is how big you are as a person. So if you have, like, tons of money, then you're, like, as tall as a giant, you're bigger than a skyscraper, whatever. But if you don't have a lot of money, then you're the size of, like, a rat. And I love the idea of that, which is what grabbed my attention to this book. And this cover is gorgeous, and, like, the book itself is so pretty. Like, it has all these little it's so pretty. But, like, what was inside was not so great. You have to get over the writing style, because the person who's telling this is on the lower end of the spectrum, so he doesn't have a lot of Mun Mun. I think he is probably the size of a rat or a mouse, like, he's pretty tiny, and so he doesn't have, like, the education that other people do, so he says things differently, and it's phrased differently, so that's odd. But yeah, like, the story itself, the plot line itself, I didn't really care about, and this was targeted to YA, and this felt more like an adult fiction than a YA fiction, just because of a lot of the, like, I don't know, just, like, the way it kind of, like, felt, the way I felt about it, the way it was worded, things like that. It felt more adult than young adult, not because the topics were more adult, it's just, maybe this would be a good new adult where it's in between, but yeah. I just wanted to love it so much, but the plot, like, really lacked for me. The next one is one that I have ranted about multiple times, and that is Damsel. Now, I don't remember who wrote this because, of course, I didn't write it down, and I don't have a copy. I borrowed this from the library to read it, but I ended up giving this one 3 stars, and I think the problem was it took me about 3 months to read, and one of the girls that I like here on YouTube really, really loved this book, so I wanted to give it a shot for her because it sounded really interesting. It takes basically the whole story of, like, damsel in distress and, like, flips it on its head, that kind of thing. But for me, the end, I can't. Like, I don't want to say anything because it will spoil the entire thing for you, because it happens, and I'm not even kidding you, like the very last chapter, how we kind of wrap up this whole mystery of the story. I can't, like, I can still vividly remember exactly what happened because I hated it so much. And it just made me really uncomfortable. Like, a lot of the things that were happening, which was the point of it, I think, because it was supposed to be testing, like I said, that damsel in distress. And in this society, like, women are treated as basically nothing. So, like, it definitely is supposed to make you uncomfortable. Like, that is the point of it. But the ending was just so much. Like, I can't. I'm not even kidding you when I say I ranted to my roommate about this book for like a good 30 minutes because it was just like I couldn't get over the ending. So this one I would probably consider my most disappointing on this list. Anyway, then we'll move on from that. But I couldn't do it. It was just no. The next book that I have on this list is The Lover's Dictionary by David Leviathan. This one I think I gave 3.5. No, I gave this one 3 stars. I picked this up from Y'all Fest last year because I love the way that it is written in its format. So it's told about a story between a couple and how they basically like aren't together anymore, and it's told in the form of a dictionary. So it is, alphabetical. It starts with the A's and ends in the. Is there anything with Z? No. Yeah, there is. And then every single word above the description, I guess, makes sense for what it's talking about. So, like, it's a really interesting way to tell the story. I just didn't like it. I think for me, the problem with this book is that it is not told chronologically. It's like it's totally random. You don't know what's going on. And one section, like, they're together and happy, and then the next section, they're like broken up, and then the next section, it's back to the beginning where they get together at the very, very beginning of their relationship. So, like, that just threw me off a whole lot, and I don't know if it's, like, I don't love his writing style. Like, I don't know. I've read another book by him that he co-wrote with somebody else. I think it was, I don't remember. I know I've read something else by him, and I didn't love that book either, but again, he co-wrote that, so, like, I don't know if this is a writing style thing for him. I just didn't love this book, and I really, really wanted to because of how it's structured. I mean, I've talked about this before. Y'all know I love books that are told differently, like have a different, mixed media, that kind of thing. This one just didn't do it for me. This is another book that falls really close along the lines of The Lover's Dictionary, and that is Bull by David Elliott. Now, this is the same guy who wrote this one, Voices, The Final Hours of Joan of Arc, and I loved this one, so it's definitely not a writing thing. I think it's just this story thing because it is Greek mythology and it does tell the story of the Minotaur. Like, that's the point of it. And I don't know if it's because I read this over a long period of time. Like, I'm willing to give this one a second chance because I did read it around the time that the wedding was happening, so like my brain was not on reading, and I read this right before, I think, Red, White, and Royal Blue and The Unhoneymooners, and I really wanted to read those books, but I wanted to finish this one before I read those. So it was like I was trudging through this, so I don't know if I just didn't read it at the right time. I don't know. I wanted a lot more from it. It's told from Zeus's perspective, I believe, so it's super snarky, lots of swearing going on in this book. So, like, things that I love and the humor that I would appreciate, I just didn't, and I don't know why. So I think this one deserves a second chance because I think I read it at the wrong time, but I just didn't love it, and I'm really bitter that I didn't love it. Alright, the next one I'm really hesitant about putting this on this list because I know a lot of people love this book, and it's really taken off again this year because the sequel came out, and that is Carry On by Rainbow Rowell. Now, I ended up giving this one 3.5 stars, but I wanted to love this so much. I had super high expectations for this book. I thought it was going to be great. A lot of people said if I loved Harry Potter, I would love this world because it's very, very similar. But I didn't, and I don't know if it's because I read it right after Harry Potter, and like that world is so much better in my opinion than this world. I don't know. I've read the second one. I'm willing to give the third one a shot because I am invested in this story because of Baz. Like, I'm gonna be honest, if Baz was not in the story, I could care less about what's going on. Ooh, the sun came out. Hello. it was okay. Like, I think I couldn't take it seriously because of the spells. The spells in this book are the most ridiculous thing I have ever read about in my entire life, because they're just made up of mumbo jumbo words that make no sense and phrases. So, like, to turn on a light, you might have to say this entire long sentence to do a simple thing, whereas to disarm somebody, you could say a word. Like, I don't understand the thought process behind this world. I apologize if you loved this book, but like, I just didn't, and I just wanted it to be so much better than it was. And like I said, the only reason I loved it was because of Baz, and I did like the ending, how it like twisted the story a little bit and not what I was expecting to happen. And the second one was not much better. I think I gave that one 3 stars as well. But again, I'm there for Baz. Like, I'm gonna be honest, he's the only person I care about in this world. So, yeah. And the last book on this list, I think, was also super hyped, and that's why I didn't enjoy it as much. And for me, that is 5 Dark Fates by Kendara Blake. Now, this is the final in the 3 Dark Crowns series, and I honestly think the reason I don't love this one, I gave this one 3 stars, so I did give it like a solid chance. And I didn't really like the ending, but it took me so long to get into. And at the same time, I felt like I was reading for a lot longer than I was. So like, a lot of things were happening, and the first 3 books are very like, there's not a lot of standstill time. Like, a lot of stuff is happening and you think that's the main climax, and then something else happens, you're like, oh, that's it, and then something else happens, you're like, okay, well, we never know what's going to happen. And I'm very used to that with this world, but for some reason, a lot of things would happen, and I'd be like, oh, so we're probably only like 20% of the way done, and we were already at the halfway point, and I was like, I feel like not enough has happened for us to already be almost done with this book. The third one in this series, I loved so much, and like, it was everything, and I will still to this day rate it 5 stars because it was so good in my opinion. But I don't know if this was not so great because it came after that. I don't know if this wasn't so great because it was the last in a series. I don't know what was going on, but I just wanted this to be a lot better than it was. But like, there are some sad things that happened in this book, and I felt 0 emotions about it. And then I felt really bad about not having any emotions about that because like, those are people that I care about. But so, yeah, that's how I feel about this one. I wanted it to be better, but it wasn't. So, here we are. Oh, well, there you go. I fixed the light problem when I was done with everything. Thank you guys so much for watching. Those are the books that I decided were not so great. But I appreciate you guys for sticking around with me. What are some books that you just really wanted to love and just were not so great? What are your disappointing reads of 2019? I would love to know. Make sure you give this video a big thumbs up if you liked it, and subscribe if you want to be part of this awesome growing family. And I'll see you guys in my next video.